This week, any talk about money can feel like risky business. With the federal government paralyzed about a budget, this is a hard week to be thinking about money and today's theme, the promise of giving. Our intractable lawmakers have chosen an option this week that few of us can exercise, shutting down. It's no way to run a household or a government, and it feels like a broken promise. Our daily needs and expenses continue regardless of our resources. When faced with differences and hard compromises, shutting down never solves the problem. And as a religious people organized democratically, that is not how we run our church. Washington, pay attention. This week we launch our stewardship campaign, our annual pledge drive to fund this church. Your elected representatives in this church have done a fine job navigating the whitewater of money, church, politics. Yes, we have politics, and promises. A bumpy and wet ride, a few of them might tell you, but throughout the planning and budgeting, they have succeeded in keeping the larger vision of who we are as a church and who we want to become. Shutting down was never on the table. In this way, we radically affirm that we are a community filled with promise, and that's what I want to talk about this morning. Money, church, and promises pretty quickly tread a slippery slope. For example, some churches preach what's called a prosperity gospel, where scriptures are interpreted in a way that promises if you give lots of money to the church, you will be richly rewarded. Quid pro quo. It's a transactional theology, in my view, not far removed from the medieval practice of buying indulgences, where the penitent buy their way out of sinfulness by giving money to the church. Stewardship committee, take note. Neither of these approaches maps on well to our Unitarian Universalist values. We don't cotton to this kind of magical thinking. We're skeptical of spiritual guarantees. But we are a church filled with promise. I began this morning by asking how you would dispense your $5,000 grant. Now, obviously, there's no right answer. But maybe somewhere in your response lies a treasure map. Matthew's gospel from the Christian scriptures asserts, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Where is your treasure? Your heart. My guess is that for most of us, the answer is multifactorial. Family, pets, home, work, church, charities, bank account. To that last point, let's not be naive. Human beings have always depended upon some measure of material treasure to survive. As you assess where your treasure lies, I hope you find that yours is a diversified portfolio, for these are all worthy investments. They are investments laden with promise. Now, when I speak of promise, I do not mean an assurance or guarantee that something will happen, like when your teenager promises to clean his room or spend 30 minutes reading a book rather than playing computer games. Instead, I mean promise in the sense of a reason to be hopeful, even expectant of something good, something desired, like a child whose combination of gifts and interests suggests she is a promising artist or musician. We speak of someone with a promising career, where their talents and opportunities merge in a way that fills us with hope, both for themselves and our world. Promise is present reality and future hope converging on the horizon, such that we expect something good to arise. That's the promise of giving that I speak of this morning. Living generously seeds this kind of promise in our lives, and it germinates in surprising ways. A couple of years ago, when I worked as a chaplain in a large urban hospital, I encountered an uncomfortably familiar dilemma. On a fairly regular basis, friends and family members of patients would ask for money for transportation or for a meal, and routinely the hospital staff would direct them to the chaplain's office. But neither the chaplain's office nor any other department in the hospital gave money to people in need. Early in my training, I asked, "What's the policy for handling these requests?" And I was flummoxed to learn there is no policy. So I asked my fellow chaplains how they handled such requests. One of my colleagues, a deeply spiritual Christian middle-aged woman who qualifies as a cultural minority in several ways and knows about being disenfranchised, looked me in the eye with a warm, soft smile and said, "When someone asks me for money, I just give it to them." I was undone. What? I thought to myself. You mean your own money? What if they're scamming you? Well, that just sets a bad precedent for the rest of us. I'm already making sacrifices to do this work. Her comment triggered my silent cascade of defenses and justifications. When someone asks me for money, she said, I just give it to them. The friend or family member of the patient in need, the beggar on the corner, the panhandler at the gas station, familiar asks to you? My chaplain colleague lives Matthew's gospel. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. She's the kind of person I imagine many of us might wish to have at our bedside at a moment of crisis in a hospital. She could talk Jesus or not, staying warmly, helpfully, generously present with her patient, with no agenda but to give. Her heart, her treasure lies in giving, and her generosity changed me. I don't always give money when people ask, but the ask troubles the water for me and disrupts my complacency. I'm temporarily called out of my self-preoccupation and reminded that we're in this together, you and I and them. Her generosity started a change within me. I started to carry some small bills so that I might feel freer to offer some of my treasure to the stranger that asks. And whether or not I give money, I try to make eye contact with the person, to pay attention to my fellow human beings who ask for help. So many of us yearn not just for a handout, but for attention, reassurance that you care, that I matter. Living generously changes us and other people. In my short time at this church, I've already met some of you who I know generously give your treasure, and not just to this church, but broadly to people in need and organizations doing good works. I know some of you feel the pinch of your generosity. Most of us aren't going to get a $5,000 grant to give away. Too bad, because I know you would direct it to worthy causes, including some of it here. In this season of giving in our church, you're being asked for some of your treasure. We need your money, whatever you can give. That's a fact. But more importantly, you need to give yourself away. The world needs you to give yourself away. In Sabbath Poem 1, 1993, Wendell Berry sums up our human condition. He begins, no, there's no going back. Less and less you are the possibility you were. But rather than despair, he continues, now more than ever you can be generous toward each day that comes. Every day you have less reason not to give yourself away. Barry pushes us to what is, for some, a theological question. Is the world a generous place? How we answer reveals much about how we use our treasure. Think about it. How is generosity at work in your life? How are you living generously? Trust that your generosity is working ongoing changes in you and in our world, maybe in ways you'll never know. That's the faith part. Trust that your generosity is filled with promise. If this church works any change on you, my hope is that here you discover that every day you have less reason not to give yourself away.
Contribute to just hearing the enthusiasm of others and the creativity about the things they would give time to. Remember that feeling. We'll come back to it. A few weeks back, we shared a poem. I hope you remember it. It was about the realization that the advice to live each day as if it were your last could have negative consequences. If you take it literally, says the poet, and devote your mornings to tinkering with your will, your afternoons and evenings to saying farewell to friends and family, you'll come to regret it. Soon your lawyer won't fit you into his schedule. Soon your dear ones will hide in the closet when they hear your heavy step on the porch. The poet, Carl Dennis, then goes on to advise moderation in this maxim and says that there is no shame, after all, in having a pair of tickets for a future event and plans to share them with someone you care about. A fresh and lovely insight. At the very beginning of the poem, though, almost a throwaway line, is another important insight. Dennis says that the wise Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote this advice about living each day as if it were your last in his journal to remind himself that whatever bounty is destined to reach him has reached him already many times. I'm keeping that as my mantra lately. Whatever bounty is destined to reach me has already reached me many times. And because it's already reached me many times, it's likely to reach me many more times. And what is that bounty? Well, one thing it is simply time. Time and life go together. Life gives us time. When time runs out, life is over. We all have, every moment that we are alive, the gift of time. And each of us alive has the same gift, this moment. Because there's no guarantee of the next moment. Any one of us could be hit by the proverbial bus, felled by the proverbial heart attack, shot by mistake by the end of the day, no matter how careful or healthy or good or needed we are in this world. That's life. We don't plan on dying anytime soon. As a matter of fact, we plan as if we have our full 80, or whatever our family history and personal health suggests to us is most likely. And I would guess that every one of us here plans to be here next week, and almost all of us plan to be here all next year, which means you need to make that pledge for 2014. And most of us plan for many years beyond that. But it is still true that the wayward bus awaits us all right out of sight around the corner. And one of the messages of the world's great religions, as we say, is that it is good to remember this. The bounty of time, the gift of life, is unevenly given. Some get a lot of time, some get less. But in a way, the gift of time is a great democratizer. We are all given one life, and most of us get some choices about how to spend it, and none of us know how much we have. There's no going to your time manager like you might go to your financial manager to find out if you have enough time left and if you can afford to give some away. We take a flyer, and we give, and we give, and we give. We give time to listen to friends, to go to meetings to make the world a better place. We give time to raise children, to care for parents, to check up on neighbors, to clean up highways and run stewardship drives for our church. We give more time than we are paid to give to our students, our clients, our patients, to all the good causes we work for. We give the time of our life. Bryan talked about the promise of giving away money, that the act changes us in important and beneficial and satisfying ways. Giving the gift of time just as much, perhaps even more so, since we never know how big our time account is. I want to take you back to the good feelings you experienced when you were thinking about giving a gift of 80 hours of found time. I invite you to remember in your body how that felt. So let's see those smiles again. I'll tell you something. You have 80 hours coming up in the next few months of time you could give away and feel just that good about. I invite you to indulge in the promise of giving. Make a plan. Take a flyer. Be a giver. Since whatever bounty is destined to you has reached you already many times, I know you can.